Okay, let's unpack this. So today we've got quite a stack of sources, really fascinating stuff that takes us right into, well, institutional tension and some pretty high-stakes risk.
Yeah, definitely.
Our deep dive is covering a lot of ground. From cabinet controversy, we're talking impounded funds, luxury jets,
Uh-huh.
right through to political corruption, these extreme financial instruments, and even a surprisingly tight local election battle.
That's right. And our goal really is to try and connect these dots for you. These things might seem separate, but we're looking for that common thread. Often it's about accountability, or maybe the lack of it.
Right.
We want to distill the surprising facts so you get a quick but still thorough understanding of what's driving things right now.
Get you up to speed efficiently. Okay, let's start with that cabinet drama, specifically DHS Secretary Kristi Noem.
Yeah, and to really get the weight of this, it helps to look back a bit, the sort of a historical benchmark for cabinet trouble.
The gold standard of scandal.
Maybe the tarnished gold standard. That's long been Albert Fall. Teapot Dome scandal.
Oh, right. The first cabinet secretary actually jailed for stuff he did in office. That name always comes up.
Exactly. The platonic ideal of corrupt cabinetry, as the sources put it, sets a pretty high or maybe low bar.
And the reporting we're looking at suggests Secretary Noem is, well, making a pretty strong run at that title.
Especially in the current political climate. The sources mention an executive branch feeling, let's say, less constrained in appointing, what do they call them, loyal lackeys.
That's the phrase. And her actions are apparently causing real friction even within her own party on Capitol Hill.
Oh, definitely. The sources say she's actively irritating Republican members, slow-walking contracts, being hard to get a hold of, that kind of thing.
Difficult to work with.
Exactly. And there's this quote in there from an anonymous GOP member, pretty raw. It says, you would think a former member of Congress would have more fewing respect for the institution she used to serve in.
Wow. Okay, that's blunt. Shows the level of frustration.
High friction, absolutely.
But the real issue here, the structural one, seems to be about money that Congress already approved.
Right. That's the core of it. The sources detail that she basically put out an order.
Requiring her personal sign-off.
For everything over $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
Even funds Congress specifically appropriated, meaning they already directed where that money should go.
Okay, that sounds like a big deal. The term used is cabinet-level impoundment.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly is that, and why is it such a legal flashpoint?
Well, it's essentially the executive branch trying to exercise a kind of financial veto after the fact.
Yeah.
Congress allocates funds, says, spend this money on Project X.
Right.
Impoundment is when the executive says, actually, no, I'm just going to hold on to it. Or in this case, put such a tight bottleneck on it with personal approval that it amounts to the same thing.
So it challenges Congress's power of the purse directly.
Exactly. It's a massive power struggle, really. A direct challenge to that fundamental constitutional authority.
And this isn't just theoretical, it's having real-world effects.
Oh, absolutely. Tangible, devastating consequences, according to the sources. Senator Ted Budd, Republican from North Carolina, he's reportedly furious.
Why is that?
Because billions with a B in Hurricane Helene rebuild aid for Western North Carolina are apparently stuck, held up by this 100K approval rule.
Billions for hurricane relief. Just sitting there.
Waiting for her signature, effectively. And Budd's response has been equally aggressive. He's put a hold on all DHS nominations. Everything.
So, using the leverage he has. Classic Washington hardball.
Is how the game is played, yeah. And it's not just North Carolina feeling the pain. The sources mention grants for projects in West Virginia, crucial flood aid for the Texas Hill Country, also stuck in the same bureaucratic jam.
All because of this personal approval bottleneck?
Seems that way.
Now, DHS has a response, right? Their spokesperson says she's just rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. Sounds reasonable on the surface.
It sounds reasonable, sure. But the legal reality, as the sources emphasize, is pretty clear. The law generally requires her to spend the money as Congress directed.
She can't just decide not to spend appropriated funds because she feels like it.
Not really, no. There are very limited exceptions, but this broad $100K approval requirement seems to go way beyond rooting out waste. It looks like policymaking through administrative hurdles, which isn't her constitutional role regarding appropriations.
Meanwhile, where are her priorities, according to these sources? Is she focused on fixing this?
Well, the reporting suggests maybe not. It notes she skips some pretty high-level routine duties, like the annual worldwide threats assessment hearing. That's a big one.
Skipping the threats hearing.
Yeah. And there's a quote from a senior GOP aide that kind of sums up the feeling inside the party, or at least parts of it,
What's that?
that she's less interested in doing the blocking and tackling of her day job than she is with promoting herself in taxpayer-funded TV commercials.
Ooh, okay, self-promotion. And apparently that requires traveling in quite some style.
That brings us to the jets. This is where the optics get, pretty staggering, as you said.
What are we talking about?
The U.S. Coast Guard, which is part of DHS, recently purchased 2 top-of-the-line Gulfstream G700 jets.
2. For how much?
The reported price tag is $172 million.
$172 million. For 2 planes.
Yep, ostensibly for her use, when visiting disaster sites under FEMA, which is also DHS.
Okay, wait. $172 million. Plus, I assume, huge ongoing costs for maintenance, fuel, crew.
Absolutely. Those costs add up fast. And look, the Coast Guard certainly needs aircraft for its missions. Nobody disputes that. But the sources really focus on the judgment here. Buying these specific, ultra-luxury, top-tier jets, especially when budgets are tight and scrutiny is high, it raises questions.
So question is need versus want. Is there a specific security reason or some high-level operational justification cited for needing these particular $86 million planes? Did the sources address that?
They did, primarily by highlighting the cost contrast, which is pretty stark. This is the aha moment that congressional critics jumped on.
Lay it out for us.
Okay, so if the secretary flew, say, first class, commercially, from D.C. to L.A., round trip, most expensive refundable ticket, maybe $2,100, give or take.
Right.
Even if she chartered a private jet, a nice light jet, maybe $75,000 for that round trip. Let's say she did that 12 times a year. That's $900,000 annually.
Okay.
Over 10 years, it's $9 million. Now, compare that $9 million for a decade of flexible travel.
To the $172 million upfront purchase price for just the 2 Gulfstreams before fuel, maintenance, crew.
Exactly. That enormous difference is why Representatives DeLauro and Underwood wrote that letter, expressing deep concern, questioning her judgment.
And they used some pretty strong language, didn't they? Something about priorities.
Yeah, they suggested the procurement implied the Coast Guard was told to prioritize your own comfort over actual operational needs. And this was happening even during a government shutdown period, which makes the optics even worse.
Prioritizing comfort over mission needs during a shutdown. Wow.
And then there's one final detail that the sources highlight, kind of the cherry on top of this image of prioritizing perks.
What's that?
She's apparently living rent-free in the house that's actually intended for the Commandant of the Coast Guard.
Really?
Yep. It all paints a picture, doesn't it? Circling back to that theme of personal convenience, potentially trumping institutional responsibility.
Okay, so that's the personal angle, the administrative overreach. But the sources pivot pretty quickly from there to something maybe even more fundamental, institutional failure at the highest level. Let's talk about the White House construction. This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, this is quite something. The sources detail immediate demolition work starting in parts of the East Wing.
Which parts?
We're talking about areas with real historical weight. Former offices used by Eleanor Roosevelt, actual bunkers dating back to World War II, even the public tour entrance area.
Gone. Why?
To make way for a new ballroom.
A ballroom. They tore out WWII bunkers for a ballroom.
That's what the sources report.
Yeah.
And it's not just like, knocking down a non-load-bearing wall. This involves restructuring a national landmark, erasing historical fabric.
And the legality of this, was it all approved?
That's the critical point.
Right.
The sources are very clear. The construction started without the required federal approvals.
Without approvals.
Yep. The sources flat out call the move certainly illegal.
Certainly illegal. But is anything happening about it? Accountability?
Well, that's the thing. The sources suggest there's very little expectation of any real accountability right now.
Why not?
Because, as they point out, the entities that would normally provide oversight or enforce those rules, well, they don't seem to have the ability or perhaps the interest to intervene effectively in this climate. The checks and balances seem paused.
Functionally paused. And the funding for this unapproved, possibly illegal ballroom.
Ah, yes. The sources describe the funding aspect as grifty.
Grifty. How so?
Apparently, the president hosted a big dinner. A shakedown fundraiser is the term used.
Yeah.
Wealthy donors.
Okay.
But there's reportedly zero transparency. Who's paying? How much are they kicking in for this, what sounds like an 8-figure project? And maybe most importantly, what are these donors getting or expecting to get in return for such a massive contribution?
So, huge potential for influence peddling right there.
It raises major questions. And it leads to some interesting speculation in the sources about the future.
Like what?
Like, what happens when there's eventually a change in administration? How might the next Democratic president handle this new ballroom built under these circumstances?
What do they suggest?
One idea floated is maybe turn that huge space into something like the White House Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Make a statement by repurposing a structure that erased historical precedent.
That would be a statement, all right? This theme of disregarding rules, norms, it seems to extend into nominations, too.
Tragically so, yes. We saw that very dramatically with Paul Ingrassio's nomination. He was tapped to lead the Office of Special Counsel.
Right. OSC. Important watchdog role.
Crucial role. But his nomination just imploded, fell apart almost instantly.
What happened?
Politico got hold of some text messages he'd sent, and they published them right before he was due to appear before the Senate Judiciary Committee.
And the texts were bad.
Bad doesn't begin to cover it. The sources describe them as absolutely jaw-dropping, truly extreme stuff.
Like what? Can you give us the specifics, just reporting what the sources found?
Sure. So, impartially reporting the content. The messages included statements like Martin Luther King Jr. should be tossed into the seventh circle of hell, demands to eliminate Juneteenth, and also Kwanzaa, which he apparently spelled Kwanzaa.
Wow. Okay. Anything else?
Yes. He reportedly used an extremely offensive Italian slur, Mignon holidays, referring to black people.
Wow.
And he reiterated the sentiment that African countries are shoal cult countries.
Just vile stuff.
It's shocking language. And then, maybe the most damning part, there was an exchange reported where someone texted him, kind of linking him to the Hitler Youth.
And his response?
According to the sources, Ingrassi replied, "I do have a Nazi streak in me from time to time. I will admit it."
He admitted to having a Nazi streak. In writing.
That's what the sources' report was in the texts.
It's almost unbelievable that someone with those views would even be considered, let alone nominated, for OSC. Did the vetting process just completely miss this?
That's the question everyone was asking. How did this get through?
Yeah.
The sheer intensity and volume of the bigotry.
Yeah.
It's stunning.
And the Senate's reaction.
Swift and decisive. Even conservative Republicans couldn't stomach it. 3 GOP senators, Rick Scott, James Lankford, Ron Johnson, immediately came out as no votes. They specifically cited the anti-Semitism present in the texts alongside the other bigotry.
So bipartisan rejection.
Completely.
Yeah.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune basically pulled the plug publicly. Told reporters he hoped the White House would withdraw the nomination and flatly stated he's not going to pass.
Game over?
Absolutely. The material was just too toxic, too indefensible. Even allies had to draw a line. The prediction now is withdrawal, maybe followed by an attempt to appoint him to a non-Senate confirmed role later.
We'll see. Sadly, that kind of rhetoric isn't limited to nominees. Sitting senators, too.
Unfortunately, yes. The sources point to an appearance by Senator Tommy Tuberville on Fox.
What did he say?
He was talking about Zohran Mamdani, who, it's important to note, is a legal U.S. citizen running for mayor. Tuberville suggested Mamdani ought to be, quote, packed him up and send him home.
Send a U.S. citizen home. Why?
Simply because he's Muslim. Tuberville explicitly linked Mamdani's candidacy to what he called a huge problem with Sharia law and the Muslims trying to take over all the areas in our country.
Wow.
Yeah. The sources frame this as just open declaration that a legal citizen should be deported based on his religion. Indulging in these really vile generalizations, blatant Islamophobia, it runs counter to, well, everything civic engagement is supposed to be about.
It's a disturbing pattern. Ignoring rules, pushing boundaries, using inflammatory rhetoric, which actually leads us pretty neatly into the financial world, because some players there seem to be exploiting loopholes too.
Exactly. Exploiting a technicality created by the government shutdown specifically to push some truly extreme financial products onto the market.
Okay, let's pivot to financial risk. What's going on?
Well, first, there's this broader cultural shift the sources highlight. A move towards what they call investor short-termism. Meaning retail traders, everyday investors are increasingly trying to beat the market not over years or decades, but in hours or days. It's a very different mindset from traditional investing.
More like gambling.
It certainly fuels demand for more speculative products. Which brings us to the filing.
What filing?
A company called Volatility Shares filed papers with the SEC. They want to launch a whole suite of 5x leveraged ETFs.
5 times leverage? What does that even mean?
It means for every 1% the underlying asset, like a single stock or a cryptocurrency moves, the ETS aims to move 5%, up or down.
So huge potential gains, but also huge potential losses. What's the current limit on leverage for these things?
Right now, the max is generally 2x. So jumping to 5x is a massive leap in risk.
Okay, a huge jump in risk. Why now? And how does the shutdown play into this?
The timing. That's the crucial opportunistic part. Because the government is shut down, the SEC isn't fully operational.
Right.
There's a provision, Section A of the relevant act, that says if the SEC doesn't object to a filing within a certain time frame in this case, 20 days, it can become effective automatically.
Wait, so they're trying to get these super risky 5X ETFs approved by default just because the regulators are sidelined by the shutdown?
That appears to be the strategy. They're banking on this regulatory loophole, using the shutdown to push through something that might face much tougher scrutiny under normal circumstances.
That seems incredibly cynical. But okay, 5X leverage, if the market rockets up, you make a fortune, right? What's the catch? What's a risk the experts are worried about?
The catch is something called decay, and it's severe with leveraged ETFs, especially at 5X.
Decay.
Yeah, because these products reset their leverage daily. They don't track the long-term performance of the underlying asset. They track the daily percentage change, magnified.
How does that cause decay?
Okay, think about it this way. Market goes up 10% one day, down 10% the next, then up 10% again. A regular ETF holding the asset would be roughly flat, maybe slightly down.
Makes sense.
But a 5X leveraged ETF, on day one, it's up 50%. Great. Day two, the market drops 10%, so the ETF drops 50% from its new higher value. That wipes out a huge chunk. Day three, market's up 10%, ETF's up 50% again, but from a much lower base.
So the volatility chews it up, even if the underlying asset ends up flat.
Exactly. The daily resetting in a volatile market just erodes the value incredibly quickly. The sources cite historical data. Something like 17% of leveraged ETFs launched just 3 years ago have already lost over 98% of their value.
98% loss, so they basically evaporate.
They can, yeah. Which is why many experts say these aren't really investment vehicles at all. They're short-term trading tools, almost like casino chips.
And this kind of speculation is growing.
Significantly. The sources note nearly a third of all equity ETFs launched this year incorporate leverage. It's a booming niche.
What are the big financial commentators saying?
They're definitely raising alarms. Liz Ann Saunders, for example, pointed out that while leveraged ETFs are still only about 1% of total ETF assets under management.
Okay, small slice overall.
Right. But they account for something like 12% of recent trading activity, and an even higher share of new ETF offerings. So the activity and the new product focus are way out of proportion.
Suggests frothiness.
Exactly. She said it directly. This kind of speculation does concern me.
And is there a counter-argument? A recommended alternative?
Well, firms like Hedgeye, quoted in the sources, are pretty blunt. They call this kind of hyper-leveraged, short-term play the antithesis of safe wealth compounding.
The opposite of what you should do for long-term wealth.
Precisely. Their recommendation, and that of many traditional advisors, is what they call the better way. Build a diversified, global, maybe actively managed portfolio. Something designed to endure market cycles and build lasting wealth. Not something designed for a quick thrill that could instantly vaporize.
A very different philosophy. Okay, let's shift gears dramatically now from high finance back to politics, but this time, very local, the NYC mayoral race.
Yeah, and it's turned into a really interesting and surprisingly tight three-way contest, or potentially two-way.
Who are the main players now?
We've got Zoran Mamdani, the Democrat, Andrew Cuomo, running as an independent, and Curtis Sliwa, the Republican.
Okay. In the polling, what does it show?
Well, consistently, Mamdani has been holding a pretty significant lead. The polling aggregators, those groups that average different polls, put his lead somewhere between 13% and 17.6%. That's a solid double-digit advantage.
A progressive Democrat with a strong lead in NYC, what's driving that?
The dynamic seems pretty clear from the sources. When the previous incumbent, Eric Adams, dropped out, or his support collapsed, most of that support went to Andrew Cuomo.
Right, the former governor trying a comeback?
Exactly. But, crucially, not enough support migrated to Cuomo to close the gap with Mamdani.
So Mamdani is holding on to his base, and the anti-Mamdani vote is split.
That seems to be the key factor. Mamdani has apparently unified the city's progressive base very effectively, and the opposition is divided between Cuomo and Sliwa.
Which means Cuomo needs Sliwa out of the race.
That's Cuomo's only realistic path to victory, according to the analysis. He and his supporters, including outlets like Fox News and the New York Post, which the sources note are owned by Rupert Murdoch, are basically openly pleading for Sliwa to drop out.
Arguing he's playing spoiler.
Explicitly, saying he's splitting the anti-Mamdani vote and effectively guaranteeing a progressive win if he stays in.
Is there polling on what happens if Sliwa does drop out?
Yes. There's one specific poll cited from Gotham Polling and Analytics along with AARP. It suggests that in a head-to-head race, Mamdani's lead shrinks dramatically.
How
You
much?
would put Mamdani at 45% and Cuomo at 41%. Still a
Uh-huh.
Mamdani lead, but suddenly it's within the margin of error. A real race, as the source puts it, with a decent chunk of undecideds potentially swinging it either way.
So Sliwa holds the key. Is he going to drop out?
All indications are no. Sliwa is refusing.
Why?
Well, it's perfectly consistent with his entire political brand, isn't it? He's always been the iconoclast, the outsider, the gadfly. Running, even if he can't win, is sort of his thing. Backing down isn't really in his playbook.
The perpetual disruptor?
Yeah, exactly, and his refusal is significant. He's a known factor in NYC politics. By staying in, he ensures that Republican and maybe some conservative independent votes stay with him, preventing Cuomo from consolidating that bloc.
So, ironically, the Republican candidate staying in the race might be the biggest factor helping the progressive Democrat win.
It certainly looks that way based on the current polling and analysis. The divisions on the center-right, or perhaps just the anti-Mamdani side, are proving more decisive than any single candidate's strength right now.
Fascinating local dynamics. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground cabinet overreach, White House construction questions, nomination fights, extreme financial risk, local politics.
A diverse stack, for sure.
So what does this all mean? When you step back and look at all these sources together, is there a connecting thread?
I think there is. What we've seen, woven through almost all these reports, is a consistent pattern. Actors, whether they're government officials, political figures, financial companies trying to circumvent or ignore or sometimes exploit the established rules and systems.
Right, like Noem with the appropriated funds and procurement rules.
Or the president with the East Wing demolition needing federal approvals.
Or volatility shares using the shutdown loophole for the 5X ETFs.
Exactly. It's a recurring theme of trying to sidestep the normal checks and balances. Whether it's legal requirements for spending money Congress allocated or getting building permits or following financial regulations.
It feels like the rules are becoming optional for some.
That's the critical takeaway, I think. The source material really hammers this point implicitly and explicitly, and it raises a really important, maybe unsettling question for you, the listener, to think about.
What's that?
When these formal checks and balances, the laws, the regulations, the approval processes, even just the political norms are ignored or deliberately sidestepped like this, how quickly does accountability erode? Both political accountability and financial accountability.
And what are the consequences of that erosion?
Exactly. Who ultimately pays the highest costs when the rules don't seem to apply equally, or when they can be bypassed through loopholes or sheer force of will? That's something to mull over.
A crucial question indeed. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. A lot to think about there.